Joining us now is a friend. Well, I'm not sure if he considers me a friend, but I remember him from our days at Soren Hall. Pete Bevacqua, the chairman of NBC Sports and a graduate of Notre Dame's class of 1993. Pete, welcome to the fight.
Vic, it's great to see you. It has been a while. I so enjoyed those days in Soren. You, to your credit, look exactly the same. I think last time we saw each other, I probably had a little bit more hair than I do right now.
Man, I remember you were a great athlete at Soren Hall, and I'm a little upset because you served as a walk on the football team, a punter, and I'm upset that you didn't utilize those resources for the Notre Dame for the Soren Hall Otters intramural team. I mean, what were you thinking at the time?
Well, I like to say I had a very brief outing as a walk on for about a half a second. You know, Craig Hendrick was in our dorm, and I worked out with the team one spring and a little bit over the summer into the fall, and it was just a blast. Never suited up, never saw the field, but just to be a fly on the wall for a half a second, and really to follow Craig around was a dream. And then the time I got to spend with Coach Holtz, who since then has become just a great friend and somebody who I admire so much. It was a fun experience for sure.
Oh, it's great to hear, Pete. Before we get started on Notre Dame and NBC and the relationship there, let's turn back the clock for a minute. Share your family history with Notre Dame because you always wanted to attend that school, and I think it started with your father.
Yeah, it did. My father was a 1955 grad, and Vic, we were all brainwashed from birth. I have four older sisters, and all we ever heard about was Notre Dame and watching those Notre Dame games. And my father and I would take trips out to Notre Dame in the summer to watch the summer practices and scrimmages, and it was such a part of my life, such a foundational element of my life. So a couple of my sisters went to Notre Dame, and it was the only school I applied to. Luckily for me, I got in. And people often ask, you had all this hype, all this build up. Could it possibly live up to those expectations? And I always tell people it actually far exceeded those expectations. And I'm still such great friends with my roommates from Soren. There was a group of about 5 or 6 of us, and we always marvel at the fact that that 4 years at Notre Dame has such a profound and lasting impact on your life. It is such an unbelievable, unique experience, those 4 years on campus. And it absolutely has had such a huge role in my life. And Notre Dame, the campus, the university is truly one of the most important things in my life.
You make such a good point. Life goes by so fast, and that you go back at that 4-year period, it's almost as if time stands still. But let's talk about time for you now and what you're doing as the head of NBC Sports. You got the Olympics, you got the Golf Channel resume, a little team known as Notre Dame football.
Sure.
Why is the relationship with Notre Dame so important to NBC? Because it's been going on for a long time.
Well, when you think about it, Dick, it started when you and I were students at Notre Dame. We've had this multi-decade long relationship. And I like to say, and clearly I'm biased, but NBC Sports makes big events bigger and big properties bigger. And you think about Sunday Night Football, and you mentioned our long-term relationship with the Olympics, the Triple Crown, all of these big, great, prestigious events. And that's Notre Dame. Notre Dame is the pinnacle of college football. And there's such a trust level between Notre Dame and NBC. And I think to the meetings we have with Jack Swarbrick and his team, where he challenges us, he pushes us and says, hey, try things here. Try things during Notre Dame games that maybe one day you'll bring to the NFL and Sunday Night Football. And why he says that is because he has faith in us. He knows us. He knows we would never do anything to embarrass the university, that we always try to not just tell the story of what's going on the playing field, but also really try to bring the mission of the university to people around the country and around the world. And it's been just a wonderful long-term partnership, mutually beneficial. And as I like to say, as long as I'm at NBC, I think the relationship is very, very safe from our perspective.
Pete, that's so funny. I think my final term paper, my senior year, was why the relationship between NBC Sports and Notre Dame would thrive for many years to come. And here we are. It's 2020. Hey, I know the
And
ratings.
I was going to say, when you think of it, though, it was groundbreaking. I mean, now there
Yes,
are
it
these
was.
relationships between networks and conferences, but this was unheard of back in the early 90s. And for Notre Dame and NBC Sports to come together like that, at the time, it raised a lot of eyebrows, but obviously it was the beginning of something that really has taken hold in sports.
And the fact that that relationship has lasted so long, I mean, a credit to both parties. But I want to talk about that Notre Dame Clemson first go around, that matchup, and the ratings it drew. Were you surprised by those numbers?
Uh, we were surprised. I mean, we knew it was going to be strong. It's certainly the best college football game of the regular season. And what has been remarkable about Notre Dame and the performance of Notre Dame football this year in terms of television ratings is sports ratings across the board have actually decreased. And I think there's a lot of factors. First of all, there were a lot of leagues that were playing at times that people weren't used to seeing it. So all of these major sports bumped into one another. We had a Thursday earlier in the fall where it was the first time ever that there was an NFL game, which was our Thursday night NFL opener, an NBA game, Major League Baseball, a PGA Tour event, and a NASCAR race on the same day. So all of these sports were colliding into one another. So when you looked at the ratings of Major League Baseball in the World Series, they were significantly down. The NBA Finals down, NHL Stanley Cup were down. Even the NFL, as strong as a property as the NFL is, has been slightly down this year. I think because of COVID, because these sports have somewhat cannibalized each other in terms of the ratings pursuits. And then, of course, we had a very divisive election in the presidential election. But Notre Dame ratings were up roughly 86% for the season, which is tremendous. And you can talk about the Clemson game, two of the very best teams in the country going up against one another. But we knew something was different when we saw the first game of the year with Duke, and those ratings were through the roof. And it just continued through the season, and it was such a remarkable storybook season with such great players and action in the Clemson game. And now, of course, we gear up for another game against Clemson this Saturday. I wish it was on NBC. Of course, it's not, but we all know where we're going to be at 4 o'clock on Saturday. That's for sure.
Yeah. Pete, it's been nearly 40 years. I want to say proud of you. You've come a long way since those nights playing monk hoops.
Yeah, that's right. But you know what? I miss those nights, Vic. That's for sure. What we wouldn't do to
Oh,
have another couple of games is playing monk hoops.
tell me about it. Pete, thanks so much for us. Thanks for joining us on The Fight.
Great to see you, Vic, and hope to see you in person soon.